Welcome to the New Testament Survey course. I'm Dr. Stephen Myers. I'm with the Institute for Biblical and Scientific Studies. And you get more information on our website, www.bibleandscience. We want to review now a New Testament survey. There are 27 books in the New Testament, and it's mainly about Christ and His church. The Old Testament looks forward to Christ. The New Testament looks back on the life of Christ and His return. The central theme of the whole Bible is salvation. The Bible starts out with creation of the world. The Bible ends in the New Testament with a new creation of a new heavens and new earth. The Old Testament looks forward to the coming of Christ. The New Testament looks back at the coming of Christ. And the main theme is salvation. There are 39 books in the Old Testament and 27 in the New Testament. Here is the chart of an overview of Christ's ministry. We have His birth. Then His baptism begins His ministry. It begins the early Judean ministry for His first year. Then we have His second year and part of His third, the Galilean ministry, where He goes up to the Sea of Galilee and the towns around that area. Then in His third year, we have the latter Judean ministry, where He comes back to Jerusalem. And then He goes across the Jordan for His Perean ministry. Then He returns with a triumphal entry and begins His last week, His Passion Week, His betrayal, trial, death, burial, resurrection, and then 40 days later His ascension up into heaven. Here we have a chart of the whole New Testament in a bird's eye view. We have the life of Christ. The first four Gospels tell us about Christ: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Then we have church history in the book of Acts. We have in Jerusalem, Judea, and then into the uttermost parts of the world with Paul's missionary journeys. When we have during this time, Paul writes letters to the different churches and people. And then we have the general epistles, those not written by Paul, that are written. And then finally at the end we have the book of Revelation about prophecy in the future. We have the four Gospels. Gospels means good news. We have Matthew, who sees Jesus as the King. We have Mark, who sees Jesus as the servant. We have Luke, who sees Jesus as the Son of Man. And we have John, who sees Jesus as the Son of God. The first three Gospels are very similar in content. So they are called the Synoptic Gospels. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, very similar, are called the Synoptic or Similar Gospels. Matthew, Jesus as King. Mark, Jesus as servant. And Luke, Jesus as the Son of Man. So we have the New Testament divided up into the Gospels, the life of Christ. Then we have church history. And then we have the epistles or letters written to the churches and pastors. So we have Christ in the Gospels, church history, and the letters. And we have two types of letters: the Pauline epistles, letters written by Paul, and the general epistles not written by Paul. Now, during the book of Acts, we have Paul's missionary journeys, chapters 13 through 28. And during his trips, he writes these letters back to the churches and places he's been to. And there's three, I divide it in three different ways. We have first the problem letters. There's problems in the church, and he writes back to them about these problems, Galatians through Romans. Then we have the prison epistles, written while he was a prisoner in Rome. This is Ephesians, Colossians, Philemon, Philippians. And then when he was freed after the book of Acts, he writes the pastoral epistles, 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus. Paul was taken to Rome to appeal to Caesar. And while he was under house arrest there in Rome, Paul wrote 4 letters. The Ephesians, which tells us about the heavenly position and our earthly walk. Colossians, about the Gnostic heresy. Philemon, about helping Onesimus, a slave, to free him. And then Philippians, rejoice, happy no matter what condition or whatever place you're in, rejoice. Paul wrote 3 letters to pastors, 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, and Titus. Timothy was sent to Ephesus to help the church and pastor the church there in Ephesus. And Paul writes 1 Timothy, giving him instructions on how to run the church. Then in 2 Timothy, this is I think is his very last letter that Paul writes, and gives exhortations to Timothy. And the final chapter he writes, I have fought the good fight. I have finished my course. I have kept the faith. Then we have Titus, written to a pastor who was sent to Crete to minister to the church there in Crete on doing good. One last overview of the whole New Testament. We have the life of Christ in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We have church history in the book of Acts. It starts out with Jerusalem, then goes to Judea and Samaria, then the uttermost parts of the earth. The key verse, Acts chapter 1, verse 8. We have chapters 13 through 28, Paul's missionary journeys. And during these journeys, he writes many letters. He's written 13 letters about the problems they have. Then he wrote 4 while he was a prisoner. Then when he was released, he wrote 3 more pastoral epistles. Then we have the general epistles, those not written by Paul. We have James, 1st and 2nd Peter, Jude, Hebrews, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. And then finally, the last book of the Bible, the book of Revelation, telling us a prophecy, the end times. We want to take a quick look at resources. There are excellent Moody Bible film strips. They may have been made into videos now. There's Archaeology in the New Testament by John McRae, which is very good, giving background information on archaeology in the New Testament. And then for like college-age students, there's New Testament Survey by Robert Gundry. This is excellent. We also have The Life of Christ by Irving Jensen. And we can get a lot more information, and these charts that you see, you can see them there and download at www.bibleandscience.com. We want to test your knowledge after reviewing the New Testament. Match the writer of the book with the term he associated with Jesus. Matthew sees him as king. Mark sees him as the servant. Luke Luke sees him as the Son of Man, and John sees him as the Son of God. Match the author with his audience. Matthew, his primary audience is Jewish. Mark, his primary audience was Roman. Luke, his audience was Greek. And John, written for the whole world. Match the author with a famous scene or reference from the Bible. We have the Olivet Discourse, Theophilus, the Upper Room Discourse, Peter's viewpoint. The Olivet Discourse is in the book of Matthew, chapter 24 and 25. Theophilus, Luke. The book of Luke and the book of Acts is written to Theophilus. The Upper Room Discourse is in the book of John. And Mark, scholars believe, is Peter's point of view. Match the author with a famous reference from his book. The 7 I Ams and the 7 Signs, that's in the book of John. The Sermon on the Mount is in the book of Matthew. Who wrote the book of Acts? Luke. He wrote, we have the Gospel of Luke and the book of Acts, written by Luke. And the phrase immediately is often used in the book of Mark. Match the following prison epistles with their theme. Happy, rejoice is the book of Philippians. Heresy, Gnosticism, the book of Colossians. Help free Onesimus the slave, as written Philemon. And your heavenly position and earthly walk is the book of Ephesians. Match the interpretation with the proper description. Millennialism. Let's break it down. Millennialism, 1,000 years. It's talking about the 1,000-year reign of Christ. Means no. No millennial reign, physical reign. They see it as all spiritual fulfillment of Christ's reign. Dispensationalism. They see the book of Revelation as a future fulfillment. Christ is going to come back literally and reign literally for 1,000 years. Postmillennialism. After the millennium, or it's the church that brings in the kingdom of God. Things are getting better and better. And then the Preterist view is mainly the book of Revelation is mainly fulfilled already in 70 A.D. with the destruction of Jerusalem. They see Christ came in judgment on Jerusalem in 70 A.D. So most of Revelation has already been fulfilled in history. Congratulations, you've completed the Survey of the New Testament course. It's created by the Institute for Biblical and Scientific Studies, and I'm Dr. Stephen C. Myers. You get more information, more courses at www.bibleandscience.com.